This is a little girl, only 9 years old. But when her uncle asked her about her ideals, the girl clearly stated that she wanted to become an assassin. It turns out that in Colombia, just a week earlier, there had been a gang massacre. Catalia's parents were unfortunately shot dead, and she witnessed it all, the scene of her loved ones dying tragically right before her eyes. At that moment, Catalia could only suppress the grief in her heart. Facing the gangsters' guns, she didn't act like a child at all. The leader, Marco, threatened Catalia, demanding she hand over a computer memory card. But he never expected that the 9-year-old child before him would never forget his actions that day. In an instant, Catalia used a knife to stab his hand to the table, then quickly climbed out the window to escape. She hid under a balcony to avoid the gangsters' gunfire. Then, she swallowed the memory card and escaped with her cleverness. Marco was furious, ordering all his henchmen to pursue and intercept her from every direction. Fortunately, Catalia knew the terrain well. She quickly slid down into a sewer before the thugs could surround her, narrowly escaping the pursuit. Waiting until dusk, Catalia opened a manhole cover and climbed onto the street. She went to the nearby U.S. Embassy to seek help. Catalia gave the guard a business card left by her father. Thanks to it, she was able to meet the official in charge at the embassy. Then, Catalia stuck her finger down her throat and retrieved the memory card, giving it to the official. It turned out to be evidence of a drug lord's crimes that Catalia's father had possessed. After an exchange, Catalia was given the chance to go to America. After arriving safely at the airport, she lied, saying she needed to use the restroom. But she actually used the opportunity to escape through a window. Evading her escorts, Catalia went to the station to buy a long-distance train ticket. It turned out her destination was Chicago. After her journey, she finally found her uncle, Emilio. This time, she could no longer hold back her grief and began to cry in her uncle's arms. Just like that, 15 years passed in the blink of an eye. With her uncle's help, Catalia became the top assassin she had aspired to be. 2 police officers were eating burgers in their car. Suddenly, a red car sped up and crashed into their vehicle, startling them both. Immediately afterward, a long-legged girl stumbled out of the car. The police immediately approached and arrested her. On closer inspection, the girl was Catalia in disguise. For the offenses of drunk driving and causing an accident, Catalia was immediately taken to the police station. So, they decided to hold her overnight at the station. The purpose was to await processing for prosecution the next day. Meanwhile, under the strict escort of federal agents, a major drug trafficker was also being brought to the police station. He also needed to be held there temporarily. Waiting until the quiet of night descended, Catalia suddenly stood up and removed her wig. Then, she reversed her clothes, completely changing her appearance. Next, using a hairpin, she skillfully picked the lock and opened her cell door. Then, Catalia took a spoon from a cup and used it to push the surveillance camera aside. In the common area, she quietly took a plastic cup and filled it with water. Finally, she opened the door and entered the adjacent electrical room. She then opened an electrical box and balanced the spoon across a switch. Then, she bit a hole in the water-filled cup and placed it above the spoon. With preparations complete, Catalia climbed into the ventilation duct and stopped near a fan. The dripping water eventually caused the spoon to lose balance and fall, short-circuiting the fan system and stopping it. Catalia then seized the opportunity to slip past the fan blades and exit the ventilation duct. She entered a restroom and subdued an officer who had just finished using it. Then, taking his gun, she located the drug trafficker's cell. Without hesitation, she shot him dead in his cell. But the gunshot immediately alerted the officers on night duty. When they rushed over, they only found the previously subdued officer, now conscious and holding the gun. Thus, he became the prime suspect. However, the police also initiated a full-scale search. Meanwhile, Catalia had already returned to her cell via the same route. Narrowly avoiding detection in a corner, she quickly returned to her cell in the shortest possible time. By the time the police came to check, she had changed back into her clothes and was lying down, pretending to sleep, as if nothing had happened. The next day, the police began finalizing the relevant procedures for Catalia. And so, she walked out of the police station with a cocky demeanor. Only then did she tear off her rubber gloves, leaving no trace for the police. The assassination quickly drew the attention of the FBI. Special Agent James was assigned to investigate the case. On the drug trafficker's body, he found a familiar drawing. It turned out that over the past few years, more than 20 people had died with similar drawings on their bodies. All the victims were heinous criminals. To find leads as quickly as possible, James decided that the series of assassinations marked with the orchid flower drawing should be made public. Soon after, Richard from the CIA approached the drug lord from years ago, the one who had ordered Marco to kill Catalia's family. It turned out he hadn't been arrested, but was instead being handled by the CIA, allowed to maintain his business for their benefit. Now that Catalia was back and proving formidable, their secret was very likely to be exposed. Richard warned Luis to handle this matter as soon as possible. Otherwise, they could both end up in prison. Luis immediately dispatched his subordinate, Marco, to handle the situation. He would do anything to eliminate this threat. Meanwhile, Catalia had returned to Chicago. At a laundromat, she met with her uncle Emilio. He gave Catalia a new target in the Caribbean. Although she had never failed, the way she left her signature drawing made Emilio worried. Leaving a trail to lure the drug lord would surely bring disaster upon herself. However, Catalia was intent on revenge and paid no heed to her uncle's words. This time, the target was an overweight man who was also a billionaire. He spent his days holed up in his villa, enjoying wine and women. To ensure his nightly revelries were undisturbed, he spent heavily to hire a large contingent of bodyguards. But he had no idea that his own death was approaching. By this time, Catalia had hidden underneath a vehicle and silently infiltrated the villa. Waiting until the dead of night, she slowly swam across the shark tank, keeping close to the surface. Next, she pushed aside a glass panel to enter the villa silently. After attaching a silencer to her pistol, she began moving, searching for the overweight man. When he woke from his sleep, he found a drawing on his body. Even worse, the hallways were littered with the corpses of his subordinates. So, he cautiously picked up a gun from the floor and approached the shark tank fearfully. There, he saw an orchid floating in the tank and curiously went to retrieve it. Just as he was feeling puzzled, Catalia suddenly appeared behind him. The man raised his gun to shoot without a word, but unfortunately, it was out of bullets. Seeing the situation was dire, he tried to bargain, offering Catalia a large sum of money for his life. But all he received were 2 bullets that sent him kneeling by the tank. Finally, he was shot into the tank, becoming a late-night snack for the sharks. Then, Catalia left the orchid flower and departed silently. The next day, the assassination quickly garnered attention. Marco and his men acted immediately upon hearing the news, beginning their own investigation into the mysterious assassin. This time, her uncle was furious when he met Catalia again. It was because she hadn't listened to his warnings. And as a result, 8 of Emilio's friends had been brutally murdered. If she still refused to give up her quest for revenge, sooner or later, the entire family would pay in blood. And so, the two had a heated argument. Catalia had been through so much turmoil, and in the end, she chose to return to her family. She thought that if she stopped, everything would be all right. But there would be unforeseen consequences. Emilio's family was still targeted by Marco. Meanwhile, James's relentless investigation led him to Catalia's residence in Chicago. Immediately, a large number of armed police were dispatched to her location. Fortunately, she detected them in time via her surveillance camera system. Catalia immediately chose to escape via the stairwell. She even took the time to retrieve a sniper rifle hidden in the ceiling. Then, she quickly approached a wall and planted a remote-controlled bomb. Meanwhile, the police were also setting explosives, preparing to breach the door. The moment the police detonated their charge, Catalia also triggered the bomb on the wall. The 2 overlapping explosions engulfed the entire hallway in flames. The blast created a hole in the wall leading down to a pipe chase. First, Catalia lowered the sniper rifle down. Then, using straps, she rappelled down along the pipes and exited the building. In the parking garage, she slipped into a ventilation duct just before the police could spot her. After successfully escaping, Catalia rushed to Emilio's house as quickly as possible. But ultimately, tragedy could not be avoided. Her grandmother lay in a pool of blood, lifeless, and Emilio himself was tied to a chair, tortured to death by Marco. The grief mixed with self-blame left Catalia devastated. That night, as James returned home, there was a sudden sound from behind him. It turned out Catalia had been waiting for him. She forced him to sit down on a chair rigged with a bomb to pressure him. If James were to stand up, it would detonate instantly. Catalia then threatened James using his family. Her purpose was to make him reveal the location of the drug lord, Luis. To protect his family, James had no choice but to comply. The next day, he sought out Richard from the CIA for help. And, of course, Richard claimed he couldn't help James. At that moment, James's phone suddenly rang. It was Catalia, instructing him to talk to Richard. If Richard didn't cooperate and provide the information, she would blow his brains out immediately. But Richard arrogantly told James that his office was equipped with bulletproof glass. Instantly, a sniper bullet pierced the glass, terrifying him. Now cooperative, Richard quickly explained everything. Having obtained the lead, Catalia accessed her secret weapons cache. In addition to weapons, she also brought 2 vicious attack dogs. And so, In a large van, she set off for Luis's location. When Marco received word of this, he reinforced the defensive arrangements. But just then, the drug lord's expression suddenly changed. A rocket slammed into the villa, causing the room to explode. Luis was lucky enough to survive. Immediately, the group rushed to the garage to get a car for his escape. But before they could drive far, Catalia crashed her van through the wall. Then, Catalia grabbed a rifle and unleashed a barrage of gunfire on the car. Luckily, Luis hadn't gotten into that car yet. He was hiding in a secret panic room. But none of them knew that Catalia had already infiltrated the villa. From beneath the floor, she began firing upwards at those standing above. Marco, realizing the situation, took a grenade and threw it down, causing an explosion. Then, a henchman with a heavy machine gun jumped down into the hole to check, laying down covering fire. Just as they thought the area was clear, Catalia emerged from a corner of the hallway, unleashing unexpected gunfire. Under the hail of bullets, Marco could only take cover behind a large pillar. When the firing stopped, he seized the chance to flee. Now, like a phantom, Catalia picked off the henchmen one by one, taking them all down until none were left standing. Soon, the entire contingent was eliminated, leaving only Marco. Taking advantage of the moment Catalia entered, he made his move. The two engaged in a fierce hand-to-hand struggle in the cramped bathroom. Facing the powerful Marco, Catalia relentlessly attacked with all her might. Eventually, both collapsed onto the floor, exhausted. Marco seized the chance to grab a nearby pistol. Catalia was one step ahead, ejecting the magazine and striking him hard in the neck with the gun's butt. Meanwhile, Luis heard nothing. Unable to bear the silence any longer, he decided to leave the panic room. He got into a car, attempting to escape the premises. But unfortunately for him, his path was blocked by a garbage truck. At that moment, the phone in his car suddenly rang. On the other end of the line was Catalia. Thinking he was safe, Luis began insulting her relentlessly, trying to regain some dignity. But unexpectedly, Catalia remained completely calm. It turned out she had already placed her two attack dogs inside his car. Immediately afterward, the two dogs enjoyed a grisly feast. Finally, Catalia had avenged her family. But her obsession with revenge had come at a terrible price. Now, with no ties left, she decided to leave Chicago to start a new life. And so, the movie comes to an end here. If you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next videos.